There are parts of the Bible's story that stand out because of how clearly they show human feelings, sometimes in their best and darkest forms. The story of Dinah, Jacob's daughter, stands out as one of the most powerful. The stories in the book of Genesis take us right to a place where family problems, issues of respect, and desires all come together. Let's say that every morning in ancient Canaan, a girl named Dinah, whose name has been passed down through the generations, wakes up full of questions. Daughter of Jacob and Leah, known for being naturally curious and wanting to experience new things, she makes the choice that day to go into the unknown. To connect with and learn from the women of the nearby lands, Dinah leaves the safety of her home in search of new things to do. Even though her family loves and looks out for her, Anella tells 6 stories that aren't like the ones they usually have. As dawn breaks, she walks out into the fields and roads that go past her family's camp. Now, take a moment to think about it. What could be Dinah's real reason for wanting those encounters? What's more important? What risks might a young woman face if she travels alone in a place she doesn't know? While Dinah explores, excited about what the moment could bring, her trip shows how vulnerable it is to cross not only physical, but also cultural and mental borders. Another place in the area is where Shechem, the prince of the area and the dream of love, is moving. He is known for being a leader and acting on impulse. He walks among his people with the confidence of someone who has never been pushed. Dinah and Shechem's paths will cross because, as it often does, fate makes it so. Shechem is shocked when he first sees Dinah because she looks so different from the women in his clan. Even though he is instantly interested, his response is based more on impulse than on respect. Have you ever thought about what makes 2 people fall in love so deeply that it changes their lives? She enjoys the new sights and dreams, and her free spirit and love of life lead her through hills and fields, getting her closer and closer to a moment that will decide her future. She doesn't know that someone is watching her and getting more and more interested in every move she makes. Finally, Shechem comes up through a plain surrounded by trees that are hundreds of years old. He describes himself, "My name is Shechem, and I am the son of love." He tries to lighten his voice, but it's hard to hide how excited and upset he is inside. After this meeting, Dinah's story takes a sudden turn that shows how complicated human feelings are, and how choices made in the heat of the moment always have bad results. Just one last thing. If the stories we share give you hope and inspiration, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the sound so you don't miss our next moving stories. Please click like to help us bring you more material that educates and changes you. Feel free to leave us super thanks if this story moves you and you want to support this work. We can keep telling more Bible stories and spreading this message of faith and hope thanks to your donation. Thank you so much for your help. Let's keep looking into what Jacob and his family's journey can teach us about how important it is to forget and start over. Dinah was both interested and scared as she stood in a quiet area and watched the sun make long shadows over the land. Shechem's layers of depth were exposed in the talk, even though it was awkward. He was so excited about his land and his people that it made Dinah feel the same way. She was torn between being careful and enjoying the stories he told. But she kept hearing in her head that she should stay away from him. It was a gentle warning that not all strangers are good. Every time Dinah looked interested, Shechem thought it was an offer, and he became more and more obsessed. He got respect and permission mixed up, making it hard to tell the difference between real interest and invading someone's space. Taking Dinah's hand to point out something far away seemed like a light-hearted thing to do, but it turned out to be the start of a tragedy. Dinah was surprised when she got a call out of the blue, but her surprise quickly turned to worry. Shechem grabbed her and pulled her closer, ignoring how uncomfortable it made her feel. Dinah's defiance only made Shechem more determined, and he crossed a line that could not be undone in his twisted desire. This action not only brought shame on Dinah, but it also set off a chain of events that would have a lasting effect on both families. The truth of what happened threw Dinah into a deep depression and made her feel alone. She was away from the safety of her home and in a lot of pain. She was an unknowing victim of the situation. At the same time, Shechem, who was feeling a confused mix of happiness and regret, tried to explain his actions to himself. He thought that his love would somehow make his actions okay. It didn't take long for the results of his desire to happen. Jacob felt terrible when he heard about the terrible attack on Dinah. It made him very angry and hurt. While they were trying to stay cool, Jacob and his boys, especially Simeon and Levi, were filled with grief. But deep down, they were angry and wanted to get even. They started to make plans for how to respond to Shechem's terrible act while they were in pain and rage. The heated arguments took over the family as they tried to decide whether to get even or be smart. The friction between Jacob's and Shechem's families grew very quickly because of stories and growing hostility. As night fell, the tense air told them that a storm was coming. In secret, under the cover of darkness, plans were being made for the upcoming showdown. These plans laid the groundwork for what was going to happen. It was decided what would happen, and the game pieces were set up for a fight that would decide everyone's fate. Even though it was late at night and Jacob's house was quiet, Simeon and Levi could not sleep. With anger boiling inside them, the two brothers whispered as they planned a way to get back at the person who hurt them and make justice happen. Something more than words was needed for justice. It had to be done. The next morning, at dawn, the brothers came up to Jacob with determined looks on their faces. They came up with a risky and brave plan. They would officially accept Shechem as a citizen as long as all of his tribe's men were cut. They had a bad plan behind that proposal. They wanted to attack Shechem and its people when they were at their weakest. It made Jacob's heart feel heavy when he heard the plan. He knew how much his kids hurt, but he was afraid of what would happen if he did something so careless. There was a real chance of war, but the drive in his kids' eyes made it impossible to deny. He quietly agreed with the plan, but it was hard for him to do so. When Simeon and Levi met with Hamor and Shechem, they made an offer of peace and healing, along with an understanding. With carefully chosen words, they talked about coming together and having a common future, but their dark hearts knew what they really wanted. They agreed to the deal because they wanted to make things right and return Dinah to her family in an honorable way. However, they didn't see the trap. Because they kept their word, the men of Shechem agreed to be circumcised, putting themselves in a position they hadn't planned for. The next few days were terrible, with a lot of pain and inability to do anything. The third day did not bring relief, but fear. Simeon and Levi targeted Shechem and his men when they were at their weakest, like a killer looking for the right time to strike. There was no way to defend against the surprise, and there was almost no way to avoid it. The brothers got even with their enemies in a cold way that shows how angry and hurt they were. At dawn, they came into the weak city of Shechem armed and ready to kill. The people there couldn't do much to fight back because they had just been circumcised and were no longer able to. The revenge was so brutal that there was no room for honor or pride, only the sadness of lives lost in the name of honor. The main people who were hurt by this were Shechem and Hamor. They were found in the middle of chaos, and the power of those who wanted to end a circle of shame obscured their fates. Shechem's last breath was the sad end of a chain of events that began with his action. Realizing that Shechem would never speak again, Simeon and Levi set out to save Dinah. Dinah's body was found in a dark area of the house that Shechem called home. It was a shadow of the lively spirit she used to have. The brothers took her back home without saying a word, but with looks that showed a lot of different feelings. A heavy silence filled the trip back, mixed with relief and loneliness. Dinah, carrying the scars of an event that would change her forever, returned to her family, far from the land that was now destroyed by violence. In this new part, Jacob thought about how hard it was for his kids to make choices. He felt both relieved that Dinah was safe and hopeless about what would happen because of their choices. As soon as word got out that Simeon and Levi had gotten payback, it made people in the nearby towns afraid and suspicious. It was becoming less likely that the future would be quiet. Instead, there was a growing fear of war and revenge. Dinah was physically safe now that she was back home, but she was still emotionally and mentally scarred from what she had been through and the bloody rescue that followed. The young woman was physically fine after she came back, but she was not the same. The memories of her terrible experience kept coming back to her, making her life even more fragile than before. In the middle of all these strong feelings, Jacob faced his children. He told them, "You have put all of us in great danger." His voice was full of worry and fear about what their actions could mean. People used to admire and value the family, but now they were afraid of and suspicious of them. They were surrounded by rumors of bloodshed, which put their fragile peace at risk. There was a lot of stress in the camp, and everyone felt the weight of doubt. Everyone was open to attack because of Simeon and Levi's revenge. They could be attacked by groups they thought were neutral or friends in the past. Because of the constant fear of getting in trouble, every day was a test of strength and stress. Jacob looked to God for help because he wanted to be sure of his faith. There was a clear need for a fresh start. There had to be a new place to live, away from the memories and threats that were making their family sick. At this point of spiritual study and reflection, things changed. They were asked to think again about the roads they had taken and the ones they could still choose. In his prayers and thoughts, Jacob looked for direction, which moved him to decide to leave. They had to leave for an unknown place right away so they could start over with their lives without the ghost of payback following them. While getting ready for the trip, the family members thought about the weight of the choices they had made in the past as they packed their things. There were a lot of mixed feelings during the leaving process. On the one hand, there is hope for a fresh start. On the other hand, the painful awareness that what you do has long-lasting effects. In particular, Dinah saw this move as a chance to turn a hard page in her life and start over in a new place, where she might find peace and healing. It gave her a glimpse of forgiveness. As the family got ready to leave the place they used to call home, a lesson became very clear. Violence leads to more violence, and acts of revenge rarely pave the way to true justice and peace. They took their things with them when they left, along with the hope that the rounds of pain and war could finally end in the future. Jacob and his family set out on a trip that meant more than just moving to a new place. They were determined to leave behind a painful and troubled past. It was a journey to find spiritual and mental healing. The emotional exit was a turning point. It was a final goodbye to the places that had seen their worst troubles and to the mistakes they wanted to make up for. They gave up the memories of war and looked forward to a future where peace and healing were not only possible, but also essential. This trip wasn't just a way to get away from the dangers they were facing. It was also a deliberate way to change themselves for the better, to try to heal the wounds that were caused by past acts and the losses they had suffered. With each step toward their new home, Jacob's family promised to repair not only their lives, but also their ties with each other and with other people. The road became a sign of healing and peace as they tried to mend broken family ties and build new relationships based on respect and understanding with the people they met in their new home. It turned out that the story of Jacob and his family was a strong example of how hard it is to forget and start over. During their trip, They told us that even though we have made mistakes and been through terrible things in the past, we can always start over and forgive. Forgiving others is an important part of building a full and happy life again. Having learned hard lessons from the past, Jacob's family worked hard to build a community built on peace and getting along with others when they moved to a new place. As a leader, Jacob shared the lessons he had learned freely, stressing how important it was to live in peace and put that above all else. Dinah's strength had become an example of hope for everyone, and she found that the new group was a good place to heal. She became a sign of beating problems and an example for people who were also trying to get better after their own problems. The community they built was based on trust and friendship, showing that everyone wanted to learn from their mistakes and make the future a better place where those mistakes would not happen again. At the new community's parties and get-togethers, the values of peace and respect were reaffirmed. This made everyone even more committed to the new road they had chosen. The birth of this child meant the end of a hard time for Jacob's family and the start of a time full of hope and opportunities. The story of the family's trip to a new start is always a good lesson of how pain can be turned into strength for good, and how important it is to always look for the light, even when things look the darkest. We are asked to look to the future with hope and to reaffirm our commitment to the values of love, understanding and kindness as we think about the important lessons we can learn from this amazing story of pain, victory and renewal. With these thoughts in mind, I invite everyone to take a moment to pray and think, asking for the strength and direction to deal with life's difficulties with the same faith and strength that Dinah and her family showed. We reach the end of this story's journey, a time to deeply think on and celebrate Dinah and her family's strength and human spirit. Jacob and his family were so happy when they moved into their new home. The peace and unity they had been looking for started to grow all around them. They built a community that was more than just a safe place to live. It was a place where people could heal their hearts and souls. Through every smile and kind act, the lesson that even the deepest scars can heal with time, faith and pardon was clear. There was a lot of support and understanding between people, which gave Dinah the confidence to tell her story. Her story, which was full of pain and victory, became an inspiration to everyone. Through her own life, she showed others that pain can be used for good, inspiring them to face their own problems with bravery and respect. Dinah became more powerful and better able to make a difference in the lives of those around her. She became an important part of the community, a sign of strength and live proof that we can change, no matter how bad things get. The group did well because people there shared ideals like kindness, respect, and brotherly love, being an example of how faith and kindness can bring even the most broken relationships back together. On a calm afternoon, as the sun went down and turned the sky orange and gold, Jacob gathered his family and neighbors for a moment of thanks. "Dear Heavenly Father," he began with a teary voice, "thank you for leading us out of the darkness and into the light. You showed us that we can build a peaceful and hopeful future with love and healing." All of them prayed together, with faith-filled hearts and eyes on the future. They asked for knowledge and strength to keep going on the path of peace and unity. The story of Dinah and her family, which began with tragedy and ended with kindness and forgiveness, showed how faith and hope can change things. Jake looked at his family and the other people in the neighborhood after the prayer. The depth of his trip could be seen in his eyes. He said this with a calm smile on his face. "May our story be a lighthouse for all those who seek the light in the midst of darkness." People all over the world were moved and inspired by Dinah's story, which strengthened faith in people's ability to overcome problems and in the endless promise of rebirth. So, with hearts full of thanksgiving and eyes fixed on a future full of possibilities, Jacob's community moved forward, firmly rooted in the principles of justice, love, and faith. They were ready to face the future, whatever challenges it might bring, knowing that divine light would protect and bless them. God bless us all as we continue to grow in our faith and change. Our hope is that this story has moved you and given you time to think deeply. If so, please click like and share this movie with your family and friends so they can learn from it too. Don't forget to tell us what story from the Bible affected you the most, or any other story you'd like us to look into. Thank you for following us to the end of this amazing story. May God be with you always. Amen.